This is going to be a long fucking video. This is the abandoned slash enigmatic slash mysterious slash interesting places iceberg. And there is a whopping 170 locations. So this video is going to be the first two tiers because the first tier is like 15 or so, or it's like not too many. And then every other tier, there's 6 tiers total. So the other 5 tiers are about 30 each. That is just way too much. Just because some locations might be a little more boring or well-known or obscure or not, right? There's lots of variation. I'm going to give the name of the place, obviously. I'm going to give the location. I'm going to give the time it was created slash established slash the idea was written down, whatever. And then I'm going to give a few details about the place. Most of these places are going to have a few details, but there are a few longer ones. And for that reason, I'm actually going to try to do the timestamp thing that you can like skip to each part of the video. So if you see that one goes on too long and you're not too interested, you can just be like, all right, fuck it. And then, you know, hopefully this setup is going to allow me to give every single place a relatively good shot at getting explained or elucidated or whatever. All right. So let's get started. Starting with tier 1, the first ones are going to be a bit basic, and I promise I'm going to talk as briefly as I can about the well-known ones, just so we can fly through, because I think tier 2 is where things start to get pretty interesting. Pompeii, located in the province of Naples, Italy, and it was founded in the 17th century BC. So the actual eruption that, you know, I'm sure this is in reference to, lasted about 2 whole days, but unlike the movies, the actual eruption seemed to allow for most people to escape, and it took place in 2 phases. The first phase being like this pumice rain, which pumice is basically like rock hail kind of thing. It's like very hot rock hail. And the second being this huge cloud of ash that just like buried everybody. Most people up until 2010 thought that the ash cloud is what killed a lot of people, but it turns out that in 2010, another study was conducted using like historical evidence and a little bit of science or whatever. I don't know how they did it. They figured out that the first phase with the rock hail was actually what contributed to almost, okay, well not almost all, most of the deaths, because the rock hail itself is actually like super fucking hot. It's 250 degrees Celsius, which is 480 Fahrenheit, which is really fucking hot. And apparently it's enough to instantly kill a human, even if that rock is flying up until like 10 kilometers away. I don't know if that's much better. I guess it's kind of better. Yeah, being instantly killed by a huge rock, I think is, yeah. Pangea. Okay, this is probably the one I have the least written on. Pangea is, well, it was the entire world. It was about 299 million years ago, and it's basically the concept that the world's tectonic plates were all once just kind of one landmass, and as time moved forward and the tectonic plates split up, we now kind of slowly started to see the, you know, the, I guess, pattern that we have today of like, you know, we got like the US and then like kind of like South America and then like Europe and then, yeah. Alcatraz is located in San Francisco Bay, California, and it was the island itself was first, I guess there was stuff that was going on since 1846, but Alcatraz prison itself is not until later, but I'll start from there. So at first the island was bought by the US from the Mexican government, and the Mexican government basically wanted us to build a lighthouse on it so that we could have, oh, this was back when, by the way, California wasn't all ours, so it was like a lot of, yeah, we were like, we needed to keep relations, whatever. So anyway, we built this lighthouse, and then we continued and we built a military base on it, which we then used against them in the Mexican-American War, which, yeah, that was a little shitty of us, but whatever. After that, the island basically began its use as a military base that was used to train soldiers, and it also housed military prisoners, which is the first kind of, I guess, consolidation of where they would put like these high-level criminals. They also put like really high-profile criminals that were just private citizens and weren't military affiliated, and this was basically like the prison for them if they like, this is like the most maximum security, as you can imagine. It's an island. It was only until 1934 that the place was not a military base and it became a federal penitentiary in which it was almost entirely made as a maximum security prison. There was no rehabilitation taking place here. In fact, there was some questionable methods of torture taking place. But yeah, it was pretty bad. Over its 29 years as a federal prison, 0 inmates were ever recorded to escape. There was about 36 altogether who tried. And they like did it in duos or trios, and they altogether there were 14 attempts, but none ended up actually getting out. There was only one person who got very, very close. They actually swam to shore, and by the time they got there, it was like Well, it was the morning and it was fucking cold, so they had pneumonia, and also they were super fucking tired because they just swam like, I don't know, like a mile and a half or something. So they got like pretty much instantly nabbed, and then yeah. There's also the story of the 3 men who went missing, and it's kind of iffy as to if they survived or not. But just because we don't know, I'm gonna say that they didn't really make it. But then again, I mean, if they escaped successfully, we would never know, right? So I don't know. It's up to you. The prison was closed down in 1963 just because it was really, really expensive. The infrastructure kept failing because the salt water and the salt air around it kept like corroding the concrete. And also it's a prison in an island, and it's like you got to get supplies. Yeah, they just like, fuck it. They closed it, and now there's just open to tourists and shit like that. There's also this mini history with Native American activists who actually sat in the prison, and they were protesting there for like 2 years. They were just kind of like, I forget what the protest is called when people kind of just sit there and take up the space, but like, yeah, they were like actively revolting. And so the US government was listened to their demands, and they basically just demolished all the buildings to get them out. That's how they listened to their demands. They kicked them out by destroying all the houses. El Dorado doesn't actually have a location because it's like more of a mystical place, kind of like idea thing, but it did come about in the 16th century, and interestingly enough, it wasn't actually always supposed to be like a golden kingdom. It actually originated from this legend, and it was actually originally called El Hombre Dorado, which is like, I guess, golden man in Spanish. The myth was based off this chief who basically covered himself in this gold powder and walked into this lake, and it was a very like spiritual, I guess, spiritual event, I guess, for the indigenous people there. And after that, the legend kind of went telephone across the entire world until it became this like kingdom that, and there were like 7 of them, and it was like really elusive, and I don't know, I don't know how people told information in that day. Like, how the fuck do you go from a guy walking into a lake to like a hidden golden city? Like, of course the result from this was a bunch of like Spanish explorers going around looking for El Dorado, and obviously they never found it because it's not real. But what they ended up doing was like, you know, killing and enslaving a bunch of Native Americans, and then like, yeah. So it was pretty much just ended up being an excuse perpetuated. Actually, the Wikipedia article I read said that like most people by like 100 years after that knew that El Dorado was not true. You know, they knew it was fake, but they used it as a reason officially to basically justify the colonization. I'm not really sure why the Incans and the Mayans are here because they're separate things, but in any case, the Incas are from South America in what's now known as Chile. They were founded in 1438 following the original tribe, and they ended, or I guess the group was totally eviscerated in 1572. The Mayans, on the other hand, were in Central America and Mexico, and they were like super old. They were around 8000 BC to around 1700 AD. Known as Easter Island, the official name of the island is Isla de Pascua province. I'm so sorry. And this is located around Chile. I'm guessing this is in reference to the statues, and the statues themselves were actually carved between the years 1250 and 1500 AD. Although they kind of look like they were like carved and then placed, they were actually formed from these very long rocks that are like basically halfway underground. And then what they'll do is they'll take the rock on top and then carve it down to this very slim kind of thing. But the actual foundation is just deep underground. This first tier is full of more of like fictional places, so sorry if like you were looking for like more history-based things. The second tier is much better for that, so I'm just trying to speed through this first tier. Atlantis obviously doesn't have a discrete location, but the story came out about 360 BC. That's when the first mentions of it were. Atlantis originally was a location fictionally written by Plato in the year 360 BC, and in his story, it's basically like this pinnacle of might and power from like a governing body, and it's it's more of like a concept than a place, but obviously because it's an old scripture and it's alluding to some very cool place, people back then were fucking crazy about treasure, and then they started trying to look for it. Kind of like El Dorado, the game of telephone throughout time did not do it any justice, and so that's why it's very well perpetuated. Even so, there were different places that people hypothesized that it could be. The Mediterranean Sea was a big one, the Atlantic Sea, Ireland for some reason, a little bit above Europe in the North Sea, and then also finally Antarctica. There's also a few random islands that people were kind of like, yeah, that looks like that would have a good city. Well, just, yeah, that's probably where it is. Obviously, this place doesn't exist or we would have found it by now, unless it's like super fucking deep underground, in which case, yeah. Also, according to some of the more fabricated legends surrounding this, because the Plato version is like the very first mention of it. From there, the legend warps. According to the later versions, the city was never actually supposed to be underwater. It was underwater, it was like below sea level, and then there was like this huge walls kind of holding the water back, and then that was the city. And then what happened is the walls collapsed, and then the sea came in and flooded it, or in some versions the sea level rose. Yeah, at some point there was supposedly an accident that led to the sea being completely submerged. Stonehenge, located in Wiltshire, England, was founded in 1300 BC. Stonehenge itself is basically a culmination of rocks in a circular pattern that are mysterious for some reason, I guess. A lot of people think that they were originally a religious place, kind of like hallowed ground, or they were a burial ground of some sort. The exact purpose is a bit fuzzy to say the least, but it's pretty highly debated just because, I don't know, I mean, it's pretty cool. It's just a, circle of rocks. What makes it even worse and even harder to debate is that the culture that created it, we actually don't know anything about them. We don't know the people who did it. We don't know why they did it, or I guess we kind of know when based off how old the rocks are, but they didn't leave behind like any records. So as far as we know, the rocks just kind of got there. The Bermuda Triangle is located between the 3 points of Miami, Puerto Rico, and the Bermuda Island itself. Holy shit. I hope that works. This mystery goes back to the 1950s when the article was published for the Miami Herald suggesting the disappearances in the area were caused by the area itself. A few years after that, the concept of pointing out irregularities in the area picked up popularity, and some party killer in the 1975 wrote a bunch of like reasons why this was BS. I mean, obviously, but come on, they killed the vibe. First off, the amount of planes and boats that went missing were not disproportionately higher than in any other part of the sea. And on top of that, the numbers were also fudged by not reporting the safe return of other ships. Other than the paranormal explanations with aliens and ghosts or whatever, a lot of scientific explanations can somewhat alleviate the mystery as to why that specific area may or may not be more dangerous. There's a lot of natural gas reservoirs under the sea itself, and because of that, the gas releasing lowers the density of the water that might lead to ships sinking. Secondly, the Gulf current is strong enough to carry boats that have stopped. If for one reason or the other, a plane lands because it needs repairs, or a boat's motor stops working, even just for a few hours, their location will be totally off, seeming like their location was warped in some way. There's also just the fact that violent weather can be pretty fucking brutal, and high waves or like thunderstorms can damage and crash ships and planes. Most of the serious cases of disappearances usually ended up resulting in the fact that the plane didn't have enough fuel, or the boat's navigation systems were totally mishandled. Area 51 and Roswell, so these are, once again, different places. I don't know why they keep grouping them. But Area 51 is located in Nevada, USA, and it was built in 1955. The base was originally created as like an air force, and the actual story as to why that happened is that there was a bomber, I guess, that was maybe doing a test run, and was flying above the dried lake that's next to the base. The crew decides that because they're low on fuel, they land on it, and apparently it was so flat, the dried lake, it felt like butter to them. So they're like, this is it. This has to be the base. So they built a runway on it, they built the base, and of course, nowadays, it's shifted a lot further off in terms of what we speculate's going on there from just being a central air base or like an airport. There's lots of conspiracies and secrecy on them. I'm sure you can imagine like government testing or mind control or any of the basic ones. As far as we know, the place is actually used to test experimental weaponry and aircrafts, but the level of experimentalness of it is probably not what we think. Like, they're probably just testing different types of ammunition or like different types of rifles, not like lasers and shit. But a guy can dream. Rockwell, on the other hand, refers to the UFO crash that happened in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. It was initially called a disc, like it was literally by the US government called a flying saucer as it crashed. The first people who saw it called it a disc. It was only until a few days later when they changed the name to a weather balloon. This kind of went away until the 70s when conspiracies became really popular, and obviously this blew up since, the government basically changed their stance a few days after. Yeah, it's just the perfect breeding ground. Chernobyl is located in Pripyat, Ukraine, and this is, I'm guessing, obviously referring to the Chernobyl nuclear meltdown. Commissioned for use in 1977, Chernobyl plant itself was responsible for about 10% of Ukraine's power. The place itself was just like a normal nuclear reactor. In fact, there wasn't even too much of like mishandling that went into it. I'm going to go through why the nuclear reactor meltdown actually happened, but honestly, it kind of just seems like terrible coincidences. The incident began on a safety test, ironically enough, on a new reactor type that was supposed to be safer under worse conditions. The test itself was basically to see if the new reactor could possibly stay cool and, I guess, not melt down in the event of a power outage. The test had failed 3 times already, and this meant that the crew that had been working with the new reactor now had to get off shift and go to bed or whatever, meaning that the new crew to take their place wasn't really as familiar. The test itself involved purposely lowering the power given to the reactor to see how it would react and how the safety protocols could kick in. But during the test, the plant had like a bit of a power outage, and of course, this totally fucked the test. The power outage didn't last long, but even though the power came back, the reactor was never able to fully regain power. Even when they gave it more throttle, it just wouldn't really work as well, so something probably went wrong. The thing is, the crew here wasn't as experienced. If it was the crew from 10 hours ago, they probably would have recognized this was an automatic fail and cut, basically all types of testing. But since this was the new crew, they went along with it, and obviously they shouldn't have done that. Of course, the reactor was now super unstable, and at the end of the test, the operators went to shut down the reactor, but not knowing that it was super unstable, the conditions of shutting it down and it being super hot basically led to a perfect nuclear reaction. There was 2 explosions. The first one was from a nuclear fizzle that obviously was created by the conditions met. And the second one was the vaporized water that was meant to cool the reactor that vaporized because of the heat of the fizzle. That one caused a lot more damage. An area of about 10 kilometers around the plant was affected by the radiation, and of course, tens of thousands of people were evacuated. As it stands right now, there was a bit of a dome built around the reactor itself to prevent the leaking so they could start to treat the land. But the place itself is still super radiated, and it's home to the infamous elephant's foot that's fucking deadly as shit. Moving on, we have the Egyptian pyramids, which obviously are in Egypt, Africa. The first pyramid itself was built in 2780 BC. The first pyramid was built in 2780 BC, and basically every pyramid has its own unique history and story overall. But no, UFOs did not build them. Believe it or not, brown people can do math. And yeah, they basically used these logs that they had, and they kind of put the bricks on top of them and rolled them, and then they used rope and they sloped them up. It was a pretty cool process, but yeah. Architecture. There's also very strong evidence that the stones themselves were brought down from mountains in the distance and transported via boat through the Nile to the location. The Holy Grail location is supposed to be in France, but obviously it's debated by academics, so Europe is generally the region that it's suspected to be in. The idea of the Holy Grail was actually first mentioned in 1190 AD, and it was actually not supposed to be a place. It was actually an art concept in which people would hold a chalice, which was supposed to be the cup of Christ, and it was supposed to represent everlasting life. It was supposed to be kind of how skulls in old art represents death or the fragility of human life. It was the opposite. So if there was a young woman holding a chasel, whatever the fuck they're called, it would be yeah, this woman is very young, she's got a lot of life. Maybe she means her purpose is to, I don't know, fucking shoot laser. I forgot where I was going with that. The specific location is up for debate, obviously, but there's some theories that it's got to be in England or Scotland. I kind of believe the Scotland one. I don't know, it's just intuitive. But yeah. The Mariana Trench is in the western Pacific Ocean, about 120 miles off the coast of the Mariana Islands. The trench is the deepest oceanic trench in the world. It's about 2 kilometers deeper than Mount Everest is tall. So even if you just put Mount Everest, a sliver of the tallest part of Mount Everest in the thing, 2 whole kilometers from top to sea. It's pretty deep. The water pressure is even strong enough to basically instantly destroy you. It's about 4% more dense than normal water, which it doesn't sound like a lot, but water literally is almost impossible to compress. Usually when there's a spray can of water that's shooting a liquid, it's not the water that's compressed in the can. There's water and then compressed air to make it fly out. Water itself is fucking impossible to compress. So 4% higher density is fucking insane. You would be instantly just eviscerated. It would be, yeah. There have been a few trips to the bottom, and yeah, as of now, They're mostly unmanned, but there have been a few that I'm too lazy to talk about. All right, we are over tier 1. Those are the basic ones. They're out of the way. We can finally get to like the lesser known, and there's even some well-known ones here, but they are more interesting than the other ones because the other ones are fucking not real. Starting off with the less interesting ones, US Route 50 in Nevada is, well, it's a section of road that's in Nevada. That's what this is in reference to. But Route 50 itself stretches from California to Maryland, and it basically crosses the whole U.S. The road itself was built in 1926, and the Nevada portion is considered the loneliest place in the United States, or at least it was, until, ironically enough, it became like a tourist spot because how lonely it was, meaning that it became the second loneliest place. I don't know why I find that funny. It's kind of like, yeah. I mean, other than that, it's just a road, I guess. I think Stephen King visited there. Stephen, whatever. He was like on the road and he's like, yeah, damn, this is crazy. Can't believe this thing is so empty. I'm going to write a book about that. Average Stephen King book. UVB 76 is located somewhere in Russia, and it was built in 1978. This is in reference to basically a radio station / antenna / broadcast system that will occasionally beep, and sometimes a voice will say names or numbers over it. And it obviously is giving away to a lot of conspiracy. There are situations in which random tad bits of conversation can be heard, but in other cases there have been super strange noises, like women screaming, and there's also been portions of the normal beeping and numbers that have been replaced by the song Swan Lake by Tchaikovsky. Occasionally, a man's voice will also be heard referencing an officer or some other government official. The Russian gov has stated that the purpose of the station is basically to confirm that other operators in the area are alert and active and receiving communications. So it's kind of like, I guess, a checkup thing. But this hasn't stopped conspiracy nuts from really digging in and, giving it all sorts of stories. Given that this was built in the formerly known Soviet Russia, I'm sure you can imagine the KGB-themed conspiracies that blossom out of this one. And honestly, yeah, not too far off. The most popular and spooky theory is the dead man switch theory, which is basically that the station itself exists as a last resort for the Russian government, in which case, in the event that the government falls for any reason, the station itself will send out a signal instantly to bombard this other states with nuclear bombs. The Bohemian Grove is in reference to the Bohemian Club that resides within the grove. So it's like, the surrounding forest. This grove is located in Monte Rio, California, and the club was established in 1878. The club has hosted many influential people, including ex-presidents and celebrities. For some reason, they don't allow women to join, which I guess made sense in the time because it's such an old establishment. But then, even then, there were a ton of lawsuits in like the 80s about gender equality in their employee base, that they only had like men, and they still didn't hire women. On top of this, they don't allow minors or women on the property past 9 p.m., which leads me to believe that this is personally like a gay boys club, which I feel like makes sense, right? If you have like, past 9 p.m., no minors. What could that mean? Sex stuff. No women. I'm just putting 2 and 2 together, okay? I'm just putting 2 and 2 together. I'm just the messenger. Snake Island, Brazil is off the coast of Brazil, and the island itself is just, I guess, referred to as Snake Island. I couldn't find any data for the founding, but there was a lighthouse built on it in 1909, and that's the earliest reference. The island is aptly named so because there is a huge snake population. It's like almost 1 snake every square meter, which is pretty insane for it's a reasonably sized island. The reason that there's snakes there is that the constant sea levels rising essentially cut off the only land bridge that was relatively shallow from the mainland of Brazil to the island. This means that all the snakes that were there for possibly like mating season just had to stay there and repopulate. Because of this, the island itself is basically impossible to visit. There was a few, I believe the Brazilian government lets some researchers in. Yeah, that might be misinformation though. I think I remember that from the article. Crooked Forest is located in West Pomerania, Poland. The grove itself is in reference to the part of the forest that it's surrounded by, which is these trees which have they go up. Their base goes up about like a meter or so. Then there's a 90-degree bend, and then they all kind of curve. They all bend towards the north, and the grove is surrounded by just normally straight trees. So there's just a bunch of trees all bent in the same direction, and nobody really knows why. There's really no technique that people have tried in other trees that they've been able to replicate this curve in. People have tried semi-breaking a tree, but then the tree just ends up dying, or when it grows out, it looks nothing like the curve. So to this day, nobody's really sure how they did it. Door to Hell is located in Turkmenistan, and it was discovered in 1971. This massive fireball pit is the remnants of a collapsed natural gas pocket that was set aflame mysteriously. The consensus is that the reason it's burning in the first place is because there were Soviet geologists in the area during that time period that basically set it aflame in an effort to stop the natural gas from spreading and preventing a massive explosion. To this day, there's really no evidence to back up that claim, and apparently the Turkmenistan government themselves basically came up with their own theory, but there was also no evidence to support that, so nobody really knows what happened. There's also this one kind of hilarious thing that apparently the president of Turkmenistan wanted to prove the rumors of his death false, so he basically got like a car and started doing fucking donuts next to the hole while reporters just kind of filmed it, and they're like, yeah, there he is. He's not dead. He's thriving by the gates of hell. Yeah. Transnistria is located on the Moldovan-Ukraine border, and the first independence from Moldova was in 1990. This state is kind of strange because it's not officially recognized by any countries, and therefore it's kind of in this limbo where it doesn't really exist, but they claim that they are their own sovereign country. Despite that, it has the infrastructure, economy, and the government of any established country. I think that its position is similar to like Taiwan, where like everybody basically knows Taiwan is its own thing, but the only reason people don't say it is because they don't want to make China mad. So it's kind of like, yeah, I'm guessing Moldova would mold. Their human rights are shaky at best, and the media is like government controlled. So yeah, it's not exactly the best place to be, but Svalbard Global Seed Vault is located in Spitsbergen, Norway. Okay, I'm going to say lots of things wrong. I'm not going to do the joke where I say it 3 times in a row and then say I'm sorry. And I'm not going to do the I'm just going to say it and you're going to like it. I'm going to say it and that's just how it's going to be pronounced. Okay? That's it. That's the, yeah, no complaints. The vault itself was established in 2006, and it basically houses seeds in a kind of, I guess, frozen state to preserve them from extinction. And it's a pretty valiant effort, I guess. They have like in the hundreds of thousands of species of seeds just kind of chilling in the vault, but I don't really give a fuck. Göbekli Tepe is located in Şanlıurfa province, Turkey. Discovered in 1963, but as old as 9,500 BC. It's known as Potbelly Hill, which is weird. The archaeological site houses many pillars and structures, making it the world's oldest monolith, or monument. The site is often thought to have been used for religious purposes, as there's no body of water nearby, making it ideal for farming. And there's also a bunch of animal bones and clothing that are scattered about in like kind of buried areas. Both of these itself implied that the land had a more religious purpose to the indigenous people 10,000 years ago. Death Valley National Park is located in Nevada, California, and it was founded in 1933. The park itself takes the name from being one of the fucking hottest places in the US. It's about 282 feet lower than sea level, and it's only getting about 2 to 5 inches of rain annually. So as you can imagine, this place is not exactly hospitable. The tomb of Jesus is exactly what it sounds like. It's the tomb in which Jesus was buried and then resurrected and then escaped/walked out from. There are a total of 5 locations that historians and theologians have considered possible locations, so I'm going to list them and then their location and then when they were made. The first location is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, and it began its use in 335. The second location is the Garden Tomb in Jerusalem, and it began its use in 7 to 8 BCE. The third location is the Talpiot Tomb in East Talpiot, and it's 3 miles south of Old Jerusalem. This one is specifically debated since inside the tomb there was actually an inscription that translated to Yeshua bar Yosef, oh god, or Jeshua son of Joseph. The debate surrounds the fact that the markings itself is like barely legible, and also if Jesus truly was buried there, he wouldn't have been resurrected, and that obviously is a big hole in the Bible. The fourth location is the Rosa Ball, located in Sringa in Kashmir, India. The exact era of this building is a bit sketch, but it's first mentioned in literature in the years 1300 to 1500. Funnily enough, nobody really knew this place existed until the founder of an Islamic revival movement, a religion that doesn't involve Jesus, by the way, claimed that in the Rosa Ball, Jesus was buried that 2,000 years ago. Obviously, this was met with a lot of criticism, and he was even called a disgrace to Islam by the caretakers of the tomb itself, since the theory that Jesus was buried anywhere on this earth is blasphemy to Islam. Damn. The last place is the Kirisuto no Haka, thought to be the last resting place of Christ according to the family Sawaguchi. I'm trying my hardest. I'm trying my hardest to pronounce. I am but an ignorant American. Apparently, Jesus was saved by his brother by doing the old switcheroo, and the brother ended up getting crucified in his place. Jesus then fled to Japan, married, and lived basically the rest of his life as a farmer. When Jesus reached the age of 106, he basically sat on a hill and then died, and his body was left there for a few years by the Sawaguchi family until his bones were just kind of chilling there, and then they brought the bones to a shrine. Moving on to Jonestown. This is in reference to the cult thing with the Kool-Aid, so I'm just going to do like a mini story time here. If you're not interested, you can skip ahead. Once again, I'm going to read the context and then what happened. The People's Temple was a Christian revival movement cult that was formed in Indianapolis, Indiana, America, in 1955. They were heavy advocates of drug use to bring people closer to enlightenment. They used hallucinogenics, opioids, pretty much anything that would involve a spiritual trip. When the 60s came around, one Jim Jones, oh my fucking god, he's literally a JoJo. Jim was a member of the People's Temple, but he was pushed out of the Indiana, headquarters because he had really radical views. And so instead, he moved up to Redwood Valley, California in 1965, taking with him a few apostles. In the later years, a few more branches of his cult, which is once again a branch of that one, opened up, and they had like a Los Angeles branch, San Francisco, and then the San Francisco one became the new headquarters because I guess its location was ideal. Jim was well liked by the local government of California at the time, and he was even made the chairman of the San Francisco Housing Authority Commission. In late 1973, a nasty article was written about the People's Temple, and 8 members even left the cult as defectors. Jim knew it was only a matter of time before they got investigated, so he made plans to move to Guyana, a small impoverished country that Jim thought he could easily gain protection in and government power from. Jim managed to successfully persuade them into letting them stay within their borders and even got land to set up his new Jonestown. The town was constructed on the 3,000-acre land in 73. This is when shit really started hitting the fan because the members were told that this place would be like a paradise. Let me also add that they advocated for lots of, communion-based socialist ideology things. So a lot of their things were basically like Jim being like, yeah, we're gonna do all this cool worker union stuff and it's gonna be great and we're gonna live on this huge thing and I'll take care of each other. And then like he just had them do everything and then became super authoritarian. So up until Jim arrived, things were actually going okay because for the most part people were getting along and they were not bothered by the government. They had like farms, stuff going. But when he arrived, things changed pretty drastically. All the movies they liked were replaced by Soviet propaganda. The infrastructure was basically left to rot as there was lots of like weeds and stuff eating at the foundations. And on top of that, obviously some houses began to like fall and stuff since this was a tropical climate and the houses weren't really built for that. As you can imagine, their access to medicine wasn't amazing, and because of this, about half of them became sick with like diarrhea and fevers. And to make matters worse, Jim had started patrolling the area with armed guards in order to catch anybody who wanted to escape. He actually began pretty terrible penalizations where he would close in adults and even kids in just like small boxes and had them sit there for hours. He also hung kids by their feet in wells upside down and they just had to sit there. Jim himself began experiencing more paranoia than before and had his members pass loyalty tests, which consisted of them drinking poison that they knew would kill them, only for Jim to say it wasn't actually poison and that they'd passed the loyalty test. But then soon they would need to take their own lives anyway. That day came November 18th, 1978. In the early evening, Jim called all members into the communal pavilion and gave the infamous speech that was recorded, known as the death tape. In this tape, he talks about how people will be killed by imperialists if they don't do it themselves first, and that they need to die by their own hands. At this point, a bathtub was filled with grape-flavored Kool-Aid, and it was mixed with all sorts of poisons. The members at first were pretty okay with mass suicide as they felt there was no other option, but as they watched their family members, friends, even children die before them, they started to obviously protest a little bit. However, they were still under watch from armed guards. They basically had the option at this point to commit suicide by poison or get shot in the head by the guards, which some of them did get shot in the head by the guards. After telling the guards to take poison themselves and assuring that they died, Jim himself ended things with a bullet to the head. Very depressing story overall. Obviously, cults are really shitty. And this is probably one of the largest mass suicides in history. Fort Knox, located in Kentucky, United States, was built in 1918. Let me just start with stating that Fort Knox is typically thought to be the location of America's gold reserve, but that's actually not the case. The gold reserve is across the street, and Fort Knox is like a completely different thing. So it kind of, semi-guards the thing. but also, yeah, people conflate them way too much. The fort was originally built as a school for new Army cadets. It slowly transitioned into a tank training area when the World Wars are going on, and finally, it's now just basically train ROTC cadets, which, as far as I know, is basically just like the future Marine kind of crowd, I guess. Yeah. Aokigahara Forest is located in the northwestern base of Mount Fuji in Japan. The forest itself is actually rooted in the volcanic rock that erupted from Mount Fuji that was produced in the eruption of 846, which is the last time Mount Fuji really erupted. There were a few kind of times, I guess it was about to, or it did, but they weren't even scalable, and 846 was the last year that it really erupted. The forest itself is nothing special, other than I guess the lava rock is like really porous, so it is very sound dampening, and lots of the tourists there describe it as being a sort of surreal, soundless space in which you can only really hear your own thoughts. Because of this, it's often thought to be a very relaxing place. Since the 1960s, this place has been known as the Suicide Forest, as it is one of the world's most used suicide locations. There's even a ton of signs at the entrance and along the trails that tell visitors that their families love them, that they should contact them, just because the number of people who go there to end their lives is super high. The suicide rates are so high that the Japanese government has actually opted to stop publication of the suicide rates in an attempt to rehabilitate the reputation of the park. I would probably do that too, but at the same time, it doesn't exactly stop the numbers from existing. So, yeah, it's a bit sad. Fukushima 1 is in reference to the nuclear power plant located in Okayama, Japan. It was commissioned for use in 1971, so we're going to run down what happened and why things went wrong like Chernobyl. Unlike Chernobyl, however, the human error that led to this was like over the course of 21 years. So yeah, this one definitely takes the dub as its fucking most avoidable, stupid fucking thing. In March of 2011, an earthquake categorized as 9, which by the way is one of pretty much the highest an earthquake can be measured as, hit the coast of Japan. For reference, a measure of 5 releases about 79,000 megajoules, while a measure of 9 puts off 79 billion megajoules. A typical nuclear bomb releases about 60 million. This puts off 79 billion. In any case, reactors 4, 5, and 6 were already shut down for scheduled maintenance, so they weren't really as big of an issue. But reactors 1, 2, and 3 were automatically shut down due to emergency systems dropping in basically like a rod of lead to soak up the radiation. The backup generators were also up and running, so the cooling system was in effect, and had this been maintained, the disaster would never have happened. Except that the earthquake hit offshore by about 72 kilometers, or 45 miles, meaning that a tsunami was imminent. The power plant itself has seawalls, which are basically these, if you live near the coast, they're like these large walls that are very thick around roads or buildings that are at risk of getting hit by waves and damaged by rising sea levels. Of course, since the tsunami was so large, those seawalls were all but useless. The tsunami ended up knocking out the generators that were powering the units 1, 2, 3, and 4's cooling systems. The following week saw small explosions and overall radiation leak that resulted in the evacuation of 83,000 citizens and 150 square miles of seafloor contaminated with 18 quadrillion becquerels of cesium-137. I don't really know what a becquerel is, but 18 quadrillion of anything cannot be a good thing. It's not all bad though, and in fact in July of this year, the Japanese government approved the release of treated radioactive water back into the Pacific Ocean. So they are kind of, I guess, capturing it and trying to soak up the radiation, and I guess that's their effort. The total deconstruction of the plant is on schedule for the next 40 years. Very Large Array is located in Socorro County, New Mexico, and it was built from 1973 to 1980. The array is made from 18 25-meter tall telescopes that have been used to make observations about black holes, stars, and, the whole space shebang. The bunch are in a Y formation, and each one is actually mounted on railroad tracks, so each satellite can be positioned just right. The only other notable thing I can even say about this place is that at some point, the VLA, or Very Large Array, was renamed to EVLA, or Extended Very Large Array. Dude, my room is fucking steamy. It was 50 degrees this morning, and now it's like 70. What's wrong with Maryland? Chicxulub crater is half underwater, half under the Yucatan Peninsula. The crater was formed about 66 million years ago, which if that number sounds familiar, I think you know where this is going. This crater is really massive. It's about 10 kilometers diameter, or about 6 miles wide, and it's about 20 kilometers deep, or 12 miles deep. This crater is thought to be the cause of the mass extinction on Earth 66 million years ago, since it coincides exactly with the suspected KPG boundary, or the extinction itself. Some drilling projects also went underway to see if they could find any pieces of the original meteorite still under there to compare age, and all of the findings basically corroborate the fact that the impact happened and that's why dinosaurs are gone now. Like Jesus' tomb, the Garden of Gethsemane has a few locations since this is like a biblical concept, but the basic gist is that this garden is the garden that Jesus spent the night before the crucifixion in, and he was praying and I guess semi-tortured. I'm not really read up on exactly what he was doing there, but yeah, this is the area that he spent in, and it's thought to be a very holy part in, I guess, Catholicism. These 4 locations are all located at the foot of the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem, so we basically know where it happened generally, just the specific locations that Jesus prayed at that night are contested by theologians. The first location is at the garden at the Catholic Church of All Nations. The second location is near the tomb of Mary. The third location is the Greek Orthodox Church, and the fourth is the Russian Orthodox Church. The Albanian bunkers are obviously located in Albania, and they were built from 1967 to 1986. There are literally tens of thousands, I think the actual number is about 197,000 of these bunkers that were made all across Albania, and they're all about like half a kilometer to a kilometer apart. So these things are like scattered. The purpose of this was to pave the way for guerrilla-based warfare, but that ended up being useless since the military was in shambles, the guns were old, and the chain of command was really confused. Now these 100,000 plus bunkers just kind of sit there, I guess. North Sentinel Island is located in the Pacific Ocean by the Bay of Bengal. This island is home to the indigenous people of the Sentinelese, who have decided that they basically want to stay isolated from the world and maintain that creed with violence if necessary. They've actually killed like 3 people since 2006, so the island's visitation restrictions are vastly limited only to researchers and academics, and even then, they can't promise anybody that they're going to be safe. This island is mostly Indian land, and it's mostly controlled by the Indian government, and they actually are so respecting of the indigenous people desires to stay isolated that even if the indigenous people kill people, they don't prosecute them because they see it as their own government that is able to do their own thing. HAARP base, or HAARP base, is located in Alaska, United States, and it was established in 1993. This research base is dedicated to the measure of Earth's atmosphere in hopes of furthering research for like sending radio waves across, and I guess it's more of like how efficient can we communicate across radio wavelengths. That's the basic gist, but on the Wikipedia page there's a whole section just labeled conspiracies, so yeah, let's read some. The first claim is that the facility is capable of triggering earthquakes and turning the sky into a huge lens to burn people, like ants, I guess. It wasn't even like a random person who said that. It was the son of a late US representative. Like a fucking person in government said that shit. Like, Jesus. So maybe it's true, or maybe it just makes it more funny. He also states that it's a mind control facility, which is like, come on, that's low effort conspiracy right there. There was a Russian military conspiracy that the site was capable of flipping the Earth's poles, which to give them credit is I guess cooler than mind control, but like holy shit, what purpose would that even have? Like, I don't know, like it's like a Dr. Doofenshmirtz level plot to like, oh, he's like annoying that birds are sitting on his balcony. Maybe if I change the poles, they're gonna migrate to like fucking India or something, I don't know. This claim specifically is pretty crazy because it was made by the former governor of Minnesota, ex-professional wrestler, and documentary maker Jesse Ventura, which is a list of career points that I would expect from somebody with the last name Ventura. They claimed it was a mind control thing as well, and apparently he actually showed up with his crew to investigate, I'm guessing wearing the documentary maker hat, and they were denied access. No shit. The last conspiracy that's interesting here was created by these 2 religious guys who claimed that on top of the site being a mind control thing, which I guess that's like the bar is mind control, they also thought that the site like sucks the souls out of people and that God had told them to destroy the base. Apparently they even had a mass arsenal of weapons with assault rifles, pistols, and like thousands of rounds of ammo for each of those, and they were of course arrested. But ironically enough, they weren't arrested for trying to break in, they were arrested on drug charges. It was only later when the sheriffs that arrested them found out about the plot. Apparently the HAARP base is actually run by an Alaskan university, and there's so much conspiracies about it that the Alaskan university has granted the public an annually house tour, essentially, where they can kind of tour the place, make sure there's nothing fishy going on, which I'm not even sure is going to help, because if you already think there's a fucking conspiracy, all you're going to see that is a cover-up. You're not going to be like, oh, okay, nothing fishy. You're going to be like, why can't I go in the staff-only door, huh? Christ of the Abyss is actually in reference to 3 statues by the same bronze cast that are in different locations around the world. The original bronze casting was molded and produced by the artist Guido Giletti in Italy in 1954. It was placed underwater in the Mediterranean Sea off the coast of San Fruttuoso. Sorry, I can't pronounce. The original idea for the statue was to memorialize the death of the first Italian to use scuba gear. Because of this, the statue is submerged at the location that the dive took place in. However, the statue itself is of Jesus Christ in kind of this benevolent hand pose where it's kind of like, yeah. The statue gets taken out and cleaned every once in a while because it gets kind of rusty. Babylon is located in Hilat, Iraq, and was founded in 1894 BC. It's basically the land where like a tons of kingdoms and empires have ruled over across history, from Persians to Muslims to other groups and societies, and it's a bit of a religious site for lots of people in the area, and it's been very conquested historically. Vatican Secret Archives is located in the Vatican City, and it was established in 1612. As of 2009, the name has been officially changed to the Vatican Apostolic Archive, possibly to make it seem less devious. This vault basically holds material and files and documents relating to the history and accounts of the city, as well as some information that the church collected over the years. The owner of the files is the Pope, and as the popes come and go, the ownership is shifted. Salar de Uyuni is in Bolivia. This place is essentially like a salt flat, and it's the largest one in the world. Its total surface area is about 10 kilometers squared, or 3,900 square miles. It's got a very unique presence, since the salt that's dried from the dried lake bed forms this kind of unique hexagonal patterns across the entire thing. And the surface is so flat that between the highest elevation on the surface and the lowest, it's only about a meter of difference. What it's also known for is in times of rain, which rarely come because it is a bit of a desert climate, the entire flat is basically just slightly puddle-ish. It's like a good 2 or 3 inches just across the whole thing, and it looks just like a huge fucking mirror. It looks like the sky just spans out in all directions. It's pretty crazy. Like I'll put like one picture. I'll put like boom boom, put like boom, and then I go like whoosh. Yeah, okay. Catacombs of Paris. Obviously, the Catacombs of Paris are located in Paris, France, and they were established in 1810. This one is pretty cool to me. I know it's like very well known, so it's a little bit like, I don't know, overdone. It's almost like comically funny because of how like stupid the whole thing was leading up to it. Okay, anyway, let me get into it. For those who are unfamiliar, the Catacombs of Paris are essentially a mass graveyard that's stretching out under the city of Paris itself. The catacombs were essentially made in an effort to move the existing cemeteries out of the city just because they didn't really have any space. Paris it's a very crammed city if you've ever been there. The first attempt at moving the bodies was in 1130, and the solution at that time was to basically pack all the bones of the already dead people into like the concrete walls as the concrete set, and they made this kind of like square shape in the center of the city. It was just in the center of the city, just this huge square wall of bones. It was, yeah. By the way, they maintained this until the 18th century. It was like a good just 700 years of them like chalking bodies in there. It was only until the 18th century when they decided to build 3 large cemeteries on the outskirts of the city to provide a better space for the dead to be buried. Another thing that led to the catacombs was that the mines in Paris were done in a very strange way, where they would basically Minecraft strip mine in random directions until the ore that was there was gone, and then they just wouldn't go back or document the path. And of course, this led to like lots of uncharted areas and lots of abandonment of random shafts. The mine was chosen for this site in 1780 when the central city's cemetery, the big wall thing from before, one of their walls collapsed basically, and then a bunch of like bones and stuff fell, and then they were like, holy shit, this is fucking disgusting, maybe we should do something about this. The mines were already seeing some renovation because they were parts of the city that the mines ran under were seeing some minor cave-ins, and there was actually even the house of a nobleman at the time that like seriously caved in, and that was of course when the rich people get hurt, that prompted the reconstruction of some of the mines. So because of this, seeing as how the mines were already being restabilized and they needed a place to put the bodies, the 2 and 2 came together, and the catacombs were essentially made. It took about 2 years to move all of the bodies from the major cemeteries into the city of Paris, and at first they were just kind of like yoinked in there, but then in 1810, while Mexico was dunking on Spain across the globe, this motherfucker, named Luis Etienne Hericart de Thury, decided to basically rearrange all the bones into like this artistic form where he got femurs and skulls and lined them up, and I don't know. I can't help but feel like there was a better use for his time, but I guess it ended up being pretty cool. He also did a little bit of trolling because there were lots of markings that he also had renovated into the place where they would say like either keep out, something benign like that, and then also like you're going to get cursed if you go this way. And it was half an attempt at making the place seem creepy, and then more honestly was an attempt at trying to keep the visitors away from the more I guess like decrepit parts of the mine that were still at risk of falling. So it was kind of like a, yeah, why not? The only real impact that this place has in the modern day is that large buildings cannot be built on top of it, just because, once again, tunnels underground, no matter how reinforced, still are at risk of falling. So they have to kind of coordinate with the underground layout as well. Roanoke's also a really popular one, but I feel like a lot of people recognize the carving of the Croatoan thing, and they kind of like, oh, spooky. But there is a lot of context that led up to this that I think is super important, and I'm going to talk about it because it was really cool. If you don't want to listen to it though, and you just want to like hear like the general thing, listen to the next 30 seconds so I can set up the basic context, and then just skip ahead to the timestamp. The colony itself was a British colonialist project in 1584, and that basically entailed the usual British spreading their power and whatever throughout the world using colonization and shit, and this time it brought them to what's now known as Cape Fear, part of an island off the coast of North Carolina. The island was called Roanoke, and after a port was established, Native Americans who were already present made contact and presented friendly relations to the British, who reciprocated. A report to England was made later that year when officers brought back 2 Native Americans to England to talk with the Queen, to talk about the natives being friendly, blah blah blah, and also to talk about the further settlements being made. It sounds like they were on really good terms, but keep in mind this was Britain and this was like 1584, so yeah. Less than a year later, the leader of the colony I guess lost like a silver chalice, and he blamed it on the Native Americans and then used that as justification to like burn their village and shit. So yeah, they were not good guys. Most forgiving British colonizer. They're lucky they didn't get like genocided on the spot. As you can imagine, this plus all sorts of things that I'm sure they were doing to the tribes didn't really help their relations, and one tribe in specific, named the Secotan, plays a very important role in the rest of this story. The Secotan were on another island neighboring and offered support to the British colonies in their harsh winters, seeing as how the Secotan already know how to use land, they already had their farm. However, the British colony leaders were fucking dicks and basically did all sorts of mean stuff. They weren't really good at negotiating. They also planned to kidnap the leader of the Secotan, which didn't work in the end, but still it didn't really help that they tried to do that in the first place. After further political conflict, the Secotan basically decided to pack up and move away to like the different island and just leave the colony to their own devices, which honestly is like the most aggressive thing that they did this entire time. Like there was this one guy who was like in the council of the Secotan who was super like anti-colonizer, but his entire thing wasn't even to attack them, it was just to move away, and that was like the reason why. Everyone else was like, no, let's help them, they're just misguided, we can give them food and stuff. And yeah, they were like way too nice with these people. By the way, for the past year, the colony had actually kidnapped a Secotan member, and when they heard that the Secotan were leaving, they decided to leverage that to try and have a negotiation with the tribe. Following this idea, the leader of the colony, Ralph Lane, took 25 men to go negotiate about the hostages' release with the leader of the Secotan at the time, Pemisapan. Except that was a big-ass lie, because as soon as they got into the council, they shot, chased, and beheaded Pemisapan, put his head on a spike, and then had it outside the Roanoke colony. And this tribe leader's most aggressive tactic was literally just to move away. That's all he wanted to do. They were like, you know what, you guys are being dicks, we're gonna move away. And they fucking killed him. That like, Jesus Christ. And even after that, the Secotan still wanted to move away. They didn't want to add any further conflict. Another kind of, I guess, sad detail is Pemisapan's name was actually Wingina, but he changed it to Pemisapan, which translates to one who watches, after his father, the chief, died, the late chief, and he, I guess, wanted to like fill in his father's shoes, so he changed his name, and that was going to be like a, yeah, I'm watching you guys, I'm gonna have a more strict hand than my father. And then he got beheaded and his head was spiked, which is pretty badass. Like, come on, man. He's like the equivalent of 70 spies changing their middle name to Danger. After that, Ralph Lane decided to leave with like a bunch of potatoes and tobacco and just go back to England, but he still wanted to like let the colony be there, but so he didn't pack up the houses or anything. He just kind of like took his people and left. This was also because they were still like low on resources, and it's not like the Sekotan were fucking anywhere near wanting to trade with them or anything like that at this point. Ironically enough, a few days after Lane left with his men, the resupply ship arrived and found nobody there. They basically just left after that because obviously, I mean, why would they stick around? There was nobody there. But they did leave 15 men to guard the general area. These 15 men were pretty unlucky because a totally unrelated mainland tribe, or I think it was a group of mainland tribes, came together to attack the 15 men, believing they were a threat to the mainland natives after seeing how this colony treated the Sekotan. But once again, the Sekotan had nothing to do with this. It was just the mainland guys that were like, yeah, we don't want that to happen to us. 2 men were killed and 13 ended up running away into the woods, abandoning the camp. They were never heard from again, so either they got chased and killed as well, and we just never found their bodies, or they, I guess, maybe ran to a different town, although nobody's really ever said that they claimed to find them. So these guys kind of just vanished. Okay, so after all of that, we finally get to the events leading up to the actual Roanoke popular event. Another colony leader, John White, had also been in England, kind of like working with Lane to establish a source pipeline. He'd planned to take a ship from England to Roanoke to meet with the 15 men who were left there. However, obviously he was unaware of the fact that they were no longer there. When he got there, he found it deserted and ended up just like, I guess, forgetting about it and assuming they left and repopulating the island with the people that were there. He brought 1,500 people. These are the people who will disappear later. The food shortages was still a problem, and it didn't get any better since the population was now bigger, and in 1578, the townsfolk of the colony convinced White to go to England and bring back supplies or whenever he could. Another tribe in the area, the Croatoan people, were actually in good relations with John White, as he hadn't done anything negative to them, and so he had struck a deal with the townspeople where if he didn't return by the time that they were about to starve to death or whatever, they would go and seek shelter and, I guess, asylum with the Croatoan people until he got back. The problem is, to get to and fro England from the Americas at that time took fucking ages. By 1588, he was finally able to set sail, and then the boat that had the supplies got looted by pirates. This made him have to obviously turn back to England, restock, but by then, England couldn't spare any ships to resupply because they were having tanglements with the Spanish. So he had to wait until 1590, 3 years after he left, to bring a supply ship. Come 1590, White's fleet finally arrived at the Croatoan island first rather than the Roanoke colony because it was already late and I guess the island was closer. They did see steam or I guess smoke coming from a fire source on the shores of the Roanoke colony, but they didn't investigate it as it was too late. The next morning, they ended up going. They couldn't find the source of the fire or anybody there. The only thing that was left was the infamously carved Croatoan in the tree. Now, given what had happened 3 years ago, John White assumed that the people had just taken to the deal and left to go with the Croatoan people. White brought 2 ships with him. Unfortunately, he couldn't stick around to search for the colony people on the Croatoan island, so what he had to do was leave for England, but he told the other ship to search for them while he left. Unfortunately, the second ship that stayed behind to check, all ships at this time had 2 anchors. One of their anchor ropes snapped, and they couldn't really go toward the island because one anchor isn't enough, I guess, to stop the ship. So they ended up having to go somewhere else, and then a bunch of complications happened, and they ended up having to go back to England anyway. So at the time, no formal search was really done. Over the next 30 years, lots of people tried to go investigate. For some reason, the first 10 years of people trying to go ended up with people either getting killed or they lost interest or whatever. But the first 10 years, basically nobody ever actually even got on the Croatoan island to check. So we have no idea what happened. And obviously after that, the people who went there found nothing. So 1,500 people plus the Croatoan tribe just vanished in thin air. Now the popular theories are that given the state of the Roanoke colony property by the time they left, the houses were not destroyed, the ground was not, there was not a sign of a struggle, there were no dead bodies or skeletons, and the boats were gone. That leads many historians to think that the people didn't actually get killed or whatever, they just kind of left either to move with the Croatoan or to move to a different colony. The problem with this theory is that if they moved to another colony, 1,500 people at that time would have been recorded, and there's no recording of it. More than likely, they would have had to assimilate with the Croatoan people, but no one ever found out, so Personally, I lean towards them simply moving and assimilating with the Croatoans because think about it, like you're going to have moms and fathers have their kids. They're going to die off in like 20, 30 years, and their kids are just going to grow up as Native Americans. The Croatoans would just basically continue as one tribe, and the kids would never know a life out of being Native American. They would have no reason to go searching for anything else. So I feel like what happened is like, yeah, they just kind of split off, and then a slightly lighter shade of Native American just kind of chilled around the area. Even so, it doesn't explain what they saw when they were looking at the campfire on their first night. And maybe even if they had gotten there, they could have asked them questions, but now it's just a fucking mystery. The actual name of the cat island Japan is Tashirojima, and it's located off the coast of northern Japan. I guess the island's always been there, but it got its name over time from the anti-rodent campaign on the island that involved freeing all the house cats. This of course led to the unnatural integration of like hundreds of cats into the ecosystem starting in 1602. Currently, the cat population on the island is way higher than the humans. There's only 80 humans on the island, and there's hundreds of cats, so it's pretty bad. Or good. I like cats. I don't know. Hagar Kim, is located in Kurendi, on the island in the Mediterranean Sea. Established somewhere between 3600 and 3200 BC, this location joins the previously mentioned Gobekli Tepe as being one of the oldest structures I've butchered almost every name on this list. It's not just a statue, however. It's more of a complex with lots of rooms and hallways that are all built, and some even have like roofs and stuff. It's been restored occasionally via reinforcements or like a stone replacement if one gets cracked. And I guess it's one of the interesting things is that some of the statues were found buried beneath a very large flat rock. The statues themselves being androgynous in appearance, which androgynous just means not showing any characteristics like masculine or feminine. So it's kind of just like a human statue. I guess it's kind of cool. Micronesia is a bunch of islands in the general West Pacific that each have a different political control. The islands are all part of the Micronesia region, but they all are like property of like 4 different governments and some like individual island governments. And there's also a ton of islands with no affiliation. The main groups are the Caroline Islands, 500 islands split between 2 republics, the Federated States of Micronesia and Palau. The Gilbert Islands, a chain of 16 islands in a line contained in the Republic of Kiribati. The Mariana Islands, made up by 15 mountain volcano islands, which is jointly owned by the Northern Mariana Islands and the US. And finally, the Marshall Islands, composed of about 1,056 islands and owned by the Republic of the Marshall Islands. There's also Nauru, which is its own country, and Wake Island, which is owned and restricted access to by the US Air Force. There's also like a fuck ton of individual history for each and every fucking region, and I'm not going to get into it because I don't care. Plus, I think I've already used my extended topic credit on the Roanoke thing. That thing took like 10 minutes. Ise Granshin is located in Mie Prefecture, Japan. It was built in 4 BC. Wow, single-digit BC. That's pretty good. This is a shrine built to honor the sun goddess Amaterasu and based on the Shinto religion/beliefs. It's one of the most holy sites as such, and because of this, access to the main structure is very limited. I think only to like the people maintaining it, but visitors are totally allowed to explore the surrounding properties and the forest. I think what's so cool about it is that this shrine, every 20 years, gets rebuilt from the ground up. There's new wood in place, there's new tiles and stuff, and it's, well, I mean, unless there's like a war or something that restricts them, they've been doing this every 20 years for the past like fucking since 4 BC. The idea is to pass on the building techniques to the younger generation, as well as to foster the idea of cycles and rebirth. It's not allowed to be built with using power tools because it's, I guess, not sacred to use power tools, and even the wood that's used to make the foundations and bases of it are like cured and processed for years before they even touch the property. Also, there's yearly festivals that take place here, which are pretty cool. Statue of Unity, located in Narmada Valley, Kevadia Colony, Narmada District, Gujarat, India. As colossal and ancient as this thing looks, it was actually only built from October 2013 to October 2018. Pretty recent, as a matter of fact. It's dedicated and mused after the Indian statesman, and please forgive me, Vallabhbhai Patel, who played a central role in uniting 562 states of India with parts of the former British Raj to essentially create India. It was built by acquisitioning the land from many local tribes, however, and those tribes actually formed activist groups during the construction of it, and they were actually arrested and I guess let go. But the groups talked with the government of Gujarat, and they found a compromise, and yeah, I guess it's not a big deal anymore. Let me also add that this thing is like 182 meters or 597 feet tall. This thing is huge. And this is tangential, but if you're a Naruto fan and you're wondering how Madara Susanoo would be like in real life, I think most people speculate that his Susanoo is, his final Susanoo form is on the higher end of 100 and 200 meters. So this statue would be like a good representation. If you want to just look at his statue and be like, goddamn. The Nazca lines in Peru are located in southern Peru, and they were made between 500 BC and 500 AD. These are basically like kind of crop circle type things, except instead of crop, the ground that is the topsoil of the ground, which is darker in color, like a kind of brownish, was actually dug out to reveal the lighter yellow sand color to make patterns across the floor. They were made by the ancient Nazcan people, but the purpose hasn't really found a consensus. The common theory is that they were meant to be seen by like beings or deities from space, as kind of like a form of respect. Other people think that they were good luck charms, given that in most indigenous cultures, different insects and animals can be seen as lucky. So they might have been there to like promote or foster the rain for the irrigation or something to that effect. These things are also pretty big. They're like really, really wide. So it's actually very impressive. And a lot of people actually wonder how they were really able to measure everything out to make semi-good looking drawings essentially in the ground at that large of a scale. Agartha is our last topic for this tier. And just a reminder to maybe drop a like or a comment. I'm going to be blunt. I need the algorithm. So just say something, even if it's unrelated, I don't really care. Drop a like, whatever. Okay, anyway. Agartha is more of a concept than a place. And this is kind of, I guess, an extension of the concept that the earth is hollow, which is a whole other back bucket of worms. But in this version, Agartha is basically this kingdom located on the core of planet Earth. I'm guessing the space below us is just like empty for like a fuck ton of miles, and then the thin crust that we live on isn't falling, because like, how can you, yeah, it's like a sphere, right? So if they're on the core, how could we, yeah, we couldn't fall on it, right? We would just have to like, yeah, okay. You know what I mean, you know what I mean. There are other iterations of Agartha, one including Agarthi, slight name change, and in this version, there is a vast tunnel and cave system underneath Tibet that's home to demigods, known as Asuras. And that's it for this video. Holy fucking shit, man. Do you know how long this took? I've been researching, and it's been tough. I got ADHD. That made this fucking tough, especially the boring ones, but man, the really cool ones are really fun. So yeah, if you liked it, like the video. I'm going to do tier 3 as just one tier, tier 4, and so on. And I'm probably also going to fill the space with some other videos. So let me know what you want to see other than the iceberg, because it's gonna take like a long time to do these. It would be nice to have something else to do in the meantime. Also, it's gonna be October soon, so I'd like to play some horror games. I don't know if you guys want to see that. I did that last October, back when I was like more of a gaming thing, but I kind of like, yeah, I don't know. Horror games are fun. It's October. It's spooky. It's whatever. In any case, that's really all I have for today. So yeah, I guess I'll see you in the next one.